Now that autumn's here, I wanted to do a tutorial inspired by those colours, so this is my autumn fall makeup tutorial. My model today is Francesca and she has a small amount of pigmentation, so I'm taking Dermacolor in D4 and DF2 and I'm mixing those two colours together. They're a peachy shade and this is just going to diminish those very few slightly darker patches of pigmentation. I like to take a concealer brush to apply this and I just pat it onto the face and then I use my finger just to blend over the edges. The reason I like to use the stipple motion with my finger after applying the product with the brush is so that it blends the seams into the skin. You want the majority of the pigment of the product to stay over the brown and then you want to just stipple the edges so that it blends into the skin and there isn't a defining line between the product and the skin tone. I'm also taking some of that peachy colour underneath the eyes just to brighten up. This is great if you suffer with any purple or blue tones on your skin. And the reason for this is because peach counteracts those colours. You can get really good colour corrector concealers from places like Bobbi Brown or L'Oreal. During the autumn winter time, people tend to not go so much for the BB creams and tend to opt for a foundation that's got slightly more coverage and a little bit more colour. So here I'm using MAC Studio Fix foundation. The choice of coverage is totally up to you. I often wear bare minerals, I don't like to wear a lot of foundation, but some people prefer fuller coverage during the winter, just because it makes you look a little bit more healthier and a bit more alive, because we all tend to have no tan in the winter and feel really drab. I'm using a beauty blender by Real Techniques just to blend this in. It's damp so it goes on really nicely and it gives you that nice flawless finish, but if you don't like fuller coverage then you can apply the same technique with a slightly sheerer foundation. Don't forget to take that down your neck and over your ears if you are wearing your hair up, and often a little bit around the back of your ears just so your neck doesn't look pale. As a base for the eyeshadow, I'm using the Maybelline Colour Tattoo 24 eyeshadow in Taupe, and I'm just taking that over the entire mobile eyelid up to the crease and then underneath the lower lashes as well. And then, as because so many of you requested looks using palettes that you can go out and buy, I'm going to use the MAC Neutral Warm palette for this look so that you know that you can create basically the entire look using one palette, and I will be doing a few more looks with this particular one. Then once you've got that colour over the entire eyelid, I'm just using a fluffy blending brush just to blend the seam through the socket line. When applying this underneath the lower lashes, you don't need to be too neat about it, as we are going to be smoking this out with eyeshadow. It's simply just to keep that eyeshadow in place. The first colour we're going to be using from the MAC Neutral Warm palette is this one, and it's called Dance in the Dark, and it's a dark matte brown. As we've already applied our foundation, we're going to apply tissue underneath the lower lashes, and this is going to prevent any fall down going onto the foundation that you've already applied. The brush I'm using is by Blank Canvas Cosmetics, and this is the E24 flat shaded brush, and I always use these to lay down my eyeshadow, and as you can see I'm using a patting motion to push the colour on. Now we've placed that colour on the eyelid up to the crease, we're going to run this colour, which is Saddle, and it's a warm matte brown, and we're going to run that right through the socket line, and this is going to be our transition shade so that we get a nice gradient from that dark brown into a lighter brown. The brush that I'm using to apply this is by Crown Brush, and this is called the Syntho Blending Fluff brush. I'm working in circular motions right around the seam of that dark brown that we first applied to the mobile eyelid. Now we've blended the seam, we want to go back in with that dark brown and apply another layer of it, and this is just going to make it more intense. And then we're doing the same with the saddle colour into the socket line. On an angled liner brush from Crown, I'm going underneath the lower lashes, right from the inner corner to the out corner, and I'm using the dark brown from the palette. Then I'm taking a pencil brush and I've dipped it into that warm brown, and we're going to use this to smoke out that dark brown. Next we're going to intensify the socket, and we're applying this colour, which is called Dark Brew. I would describe this as a deep chocolatey reddish brown, and this works beautifully on top of that saddle colour which we put in the socket line as our transition shade. And the purpose of using that nice transition shade is it makes light work of this blending. If you were to apply this darker colour straight onto the skin, it would need a lot of blending. So I hope that's easy terminology for you to understand. So now we're taking that colour on a pencil brush, and the idea is that we've got the dark colour right close to the lash line, and then it smokes out into this shade underneath those lower lashes. And using the blending brush, you can see I'm pulling it round in a C shape from the bottom lashes to the top lid. As you can see, when Francesca's got her eyes closed, we've got this lovely autumnal burnt orangey appearance going on in the socket. Next I'm taking this Kajal black pencil by Kryolan, and I'm running that close to the lashes on the top lid. and I'm wiggling it, almost massaging it right between those lashes, and that's going to give us a nice inky black appearance. And then I'm using an angled brush just to soften that and blend it. And then I'm taking that same pencil across the waterline, and to do this I'm gently pulling down Francesca's eyelids and then just running that pencil softly along there. So the next part of the tutorial is eyebrows, and as usual I'm using my Anastasia Beverly Hills brow powders, and I'm using the colour Ebony, which is the darkest one. I'm using the darkest shade here because my lighting is super strong. If I was doing Francesca's makeup for any other reason than filming, then I would probably use a lighter shade because she doesn't need to go quite as dark. She's got really great natural shape, so I'm literally just filling them in and making them ever so slightly thicker. When wearing a smoky eye, it's a good idea to fill your brows in a little bit darker. I'm using this brow gel by Eyeko, which does have a small amount of pigment to it, so if you're not a fan of penciling your brows in or using powder, then you can just use this just to add a small amount of colour to them. To add a highlight to the inner corners of the eyes, I'm using Honey Lust. This is one of my all-time favourite MAC eyeshadows. Now it's time for eyelashes, and I'm using this beautiful pair by, I believe it's called Esqido, and these ones are called BFF. They're on a nice solid band, but it's not thick where they don't bend. They're the sets I cannot get on with. These are 100% mink and they're really full and fluffy. I'm also applying a bottom set, and these are called Precious and they're by House of Lashes, and I'm using tweezers to apply them, and I'm also manipulating them while they're drying so they don't dry flat to the face. Now to add a little bit of warmth to the circumference of the face, I'm using this Chanel Tan Soleil, I can never pronounce it, but I'm using that, and I'm using it on a Real Techniques brush. I'm adding it around the hairline and around onto the cheekbones, a little bit down the sides of the jaw and then onto the neck, because you just want it to warm up that area. Because it's the winter, your foundation is enough to give you that colour, you don't want to go over the top with bronzer. Your neck's always the lightest part where your chin shields it from the sun, so you can add a little bit extra there. If you're oily, I would powder down the centre of the face. If you're not, then you can afford to leave your foundation looking dewy. Because it is the winter, you want to add a little bit of youthful glow to your skin. On my Ray Morris Kabuki Ultimate Cheekbone Brush, I'm using Shadowy by MAC to sculpt. I'm taking that underneath the cheekbones and I'm just pulling the colour up, and this is going to add a little bit of colour but also sink in the cheeks. If you're of a fairer skin tone than Francesca is, I wouldn't use Shadowy to sculpt. Some great colours to try are Bone Beige or Harmony, they're both by MAC, or even Heroine by Illamasqua, it's another great one for shaping your face. I'm using a little bit of the colour Sculpt down the sides of the nose. For blusher, I'm using this Glamour Glow Indulgence palette, and I'm using Sweet Plum and Berry Passion mixed together, and I'm using that on my Zoeva Luxe Cheek Finish brush. If you're looking to get this palette, it's by Kryolan and it's in their highlighter section, it's not under the blusher section. And the reason for this is because they do contain shimmer pigments, so they are classed as highlighters but they make beautiful glowing blushes. So as you can see, when Francesca moves her head, she's got this beautiful high shine to her cheeks. To line Francesca's lips, I used Stone Lip Pencil by MAC. As this is an autumnal look, we don't want to go into anything too bright, so the lip colour we're going to go for is like a brown berry shade. Remember when lining your lips to get your model or yourself to stretch your mouth open so you can get right into those corners. For the lipstick, I created a custom blend. I will put a link to the two lipsticks I used in the description bar. I tried to choose a colour that would complement those warm shades we've got running through the socket line, and I think this colour worked really well, and it's very autumnal and works perfect for the season. The brush I'm using to apply this is by Ray Morris, and it's her number 19 lip brush, and it's perfect. It's lovely, long and flat, so you can glide down the lips and create that really nice sharp edge. But should you need to go and clean up and create a nice clean line, you can just use a little bit of concealer on an angled brush. Just on the centre of the lips, I'm applying Cafe Latte by Estee Lauder just for a little bit of high shine. You could always opt for a gloss, but remember, if it's in the winter, you're bound to get your hair in it. That is my full autumnal makeup tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do the usual drill, thumbs up, comment below, and I will comment back to you. And lastly, I'd like to say a big thank you to Francesca for being my model. If you haven't done already, please subscribe, and if you've missed any of my previous tutorials, you can click any of these three now and they will link you to other tutorials. There's also links in my description bar, and you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for watching!